Would somebody want to reflect a few things from yesterday that would be of uh, use to us when we discuss further? I hope you all worked on the reflection form that I had asked you to work on. Have you
Yes,
done
sir.
that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. So then we'll proceed. If there are no points, you can always raise your hand whenever you want to do it. I have some kind of an asking rate in the number of slides I do per hour. I'll not reveal that now, but I think I'm trying to do that. But if I'm rushing through or something, please stop me also. You feel free to do that. Ultimately, you have to learn and you need to have the time to absorb what I'm saying. So I come back to the original picture that we started with, and I'm just asking a new question: who is stretching more here? And therefore, who would you be in the drama between ONGC and you? So what we'll talk about is continue a little bit on the context of the proposal writing, and then look at project thinking, which is I would say, the heart of the whole program. And we'll see how much of other ideas we can cover, including risk management. So this is a reflection sheet. So we'll keep coming back to this when we think that we have covered enough ground. Uh, so just refreshing you with this whole life cycle phase of the proposal making, conceptualization, feasibility. We have actually touched upon conceptualization. We have not touched so much upon feasibility planning, detailed planning, etc. And that's what we'll try to cover today. Uh, so before I start off, I thought with the feedback that I received and some thoughts that I had about what we had to do, I think if we have to start making a proposal, we have to begin with the end in mind. Maybe this is what I missed out in yesterday's concept paper work. What aspect of social impact is addressed? Why is it important to me and to ONGC? This is very important. How is it that it affects me as an individual, my cluster, and my institution, and also ONGC as a whole? And then, of course, scope, impact measurability, and what is ground zero, where we are now? What connects the end state to the present ground zero through what we can do? This is what I think is an important part. I'll show you a few more things in this. The next slide is what could be the solutions? Have we looked at the alternatives, technology, what is appropriate to this scale of operations, appropriate to the location, etc. And then are we cost competitive in the whole process? Is also a question we have to look at. What will be the milestones on the way? What is the right time to start? Because there are some things that that will be affected by seasons. Whether rainy season is a good time to start or summer is a good time to start. All this also affects the starting point. What is the preparation required to start? Now, if you can cover all this in your executive summary, you have almost got most of the ideas in good place. Then you can talk about the highlights of the uniqueness of the project, the milestones, and of course the two critical things: cost estimates and timelines and key assumptions risks, and the project closure strategy. So I think if you want to get in one slide what my executive summary should do, you'll have to read the previous two slides and read this slide also. I thought it will be useful to try and make a shared purpose example. I'm not saying that this is ideal or this is the best shared purpose example, but a sense of shared purpose that is not too much of words, but still trying to focus on where we want to touch on. You can read this when you get a little time. Uh, so basically, I'm trying to say, how do I connect to ONGC's purpose in an executive summary or in a proposal also? So you can have a glance at these things. And then some areas where clarity is lost. I think this is something that, again, I thought about it after going through some of the proposals. I have a little feedback on that through also in the process. Scope for getting input is constrained. Okay, sometimes we constrain. Most projects are actually not bringing out the best results when there is a constraint in the mind about what are the inputs I have access to and what are the inputs that I can afford to have. So I think at some point in time in the scope making, we should look at both limiting the scope as well as expanding the scope. And one point is about how do we not constrain ourselves in our thinking that we are in this place, we are limited by these resources and all that. I'd in fact go to the extent of saying there's a high level of middle class thinking in this process, and we have to overcome that middle class way of looking at things actually. Output is not an outcome. I think output may be easy to measure, but outcome may be more difficult to measure. So we get caught in measuring the output. And is that the outcome really? We have to question. So the difference between output and outcome must be clear in our minds. Outcome is more difficult to measure, obviously, but we must start with saying that let's have a baseline measurement. If we don't have the data, we must include in the project that we're going to create some activities and have resources allocated, and will take time and it costs money to create the baseline measurements. Assuming that we have no baseline data available. Maybe there's somebody else who's already done that work and they may say that we have this data, why don't you use this? So you cut off that part from the project and say, okay, we'll save so much money for that. Linkages of drivers of the impact or to the project are not established. That means what we are saying is there are drivers of the impact. Now the project has to establish that in the proposal that we are getting to the drivers of the impact. An example could be, I'm just taking an example from one of the points that was there in the proposal. Water quality improvement may reduce malaria or not. I don't know. But more significant for me would be, is malaria significant in that population presently? I have to have that data. I'll take a specific example. I think one of the proposals talks about 90% reduction in malaria. But if that malaria is only restricted to 1% of the population or 5% of the population, is it a significant improvement? Is it something that we should be talking about? So these are some of the things that we will have to consider. Few comments on the proposals that were reviewed, and I am kind of giving this with a condition that you may be able to make out which proposal I am talking about. You may not be able to make out. It doesn't matter. This is a very broad-based point I have made. It's like a general remarks or some of the concluding remarks on reading the paper. So one is segregate data from project communication. We must be clear that project communication is what we are talking about in the proposal. So don't get caught up with the data we have. We may be very good. We may have a lot of data, but is it necessary for getting the decision in our favor? That's the question. So more is not necessarily better. The key information is often hidden also. So in the process of providing more data, we might actually hide some vital parts of the whole proposal also, which would make a killing. And we may be missing the wood for the trees actually. Is the impact important for CSR funding? That I think is a very important question. If this is not, if the answer is yes, then you should go ahead with it, or you have to relook at how we are pitching the proposal. Strengthen clarity of scope and outcomes and align with the funding agency, go beyond local. I think so that scope has to be relooked at. Is local good enough? Is it that we are pitching too low, etc.? Or are we pitching too high? So scope is going to be a very, very important part of our whole work on the proposal making. Alignment to a larger opportunity is missed. That means maybe we are looking at some small part of the whole thing, and maybe we are missing something more important, bigger. Or it can be we are trying to pitch too big, and maybe there is a chance that they will cut down on the funding, and then what do we have an option to do it in a smaller way? So both possibilities have to be looked at. Assumptions are not clear. I think that's something that must be very, very clear. Clarity comes from the assumptions that I read on the paper, because then I know that how much of thought is going into preparing the proposal. Some of the targets are without baseline reference. So this is just another general remark. You have any questions or clarifications on this, you can ask me. I can't see your faces, and so if somebody is monitoring, you can please raise your hand or unmute and speak to me. I'll pause for a small thing so that if you want to raise your hand or something, you can do that. So I'll almost close the first part of the whole thing. I mean, connecting it to yesterday's sessions by giving you a few points on how do we get clarity and show clarity, because this is a point which you said this is a very important dimension of a proposal or a concept note. By the way, my original dimension work was with the proposal, and actually have 8 dimensions. But then when I was looking at the concept note, I thought I should also make it brief. So I kept only, I think, how much, 6 or 5 or 6. Okay. But what is important is if you have the time, you can create more dimensions and have more fun with it also. Is a project owned by the proposer? I
There is
would,
one question.
sorry,
Vishaka has some.
you have a
Vishaka.
point? Okay.
Yeah.
So shall I close the presentation? You can talk to me.
Yeah, we can talk. Vishaka, you
Morning,
can.
sir. This is Vishakha from Bhubaneswar cluster.
Yeah. Good morning. Yeah.
Sir, I just need a little bit more clarity on market projections.
Okay.
How to assess, how to write about market projections and how to align it with the project goals.
Can you talk with reference to your proposal so that
Yeah,
I'll be a
so
little more
my
clear?
proposal is based on developing technological interventions using biomass from an invasive weed, Phragmites carca,
Hmm.
which is also required for management of the Chilika Lake wetland in Odisha, and
Okay.
creating sustainable livelihood from the biomass of Phragmites carca.
Okay.
So for that, we are focusing on using the biomass to create paper, corrugated boards, particle boards, and generating sustainable livelihood for fishermen community in and around Chilika Lake.
Okay. Great. Now, what I would look at is you may be able to bring in the technology, you may be able to bring in the raw material, so you can create the output. The point you have to consider is selling and marketing are not easy. They can't be taken for granted. So, can you be clear about the geography in which you will sell it? What are the competition? What are the price parameters? There's so many aspects of it that we have to consider. So, one way to do that would be to start with, let us say, who are likely to be my customers? How will they buy? They're already buying something. They're not waiting for me to produce something to buy. They're already doing something. So, what will make them change their decision? Of course, price is one issue, but maybe there are some other things that you have to consider. Uh, so, you have to look at the entire system of how will I distribute my product? What is the cost of distributing it? I would say, as a thumb rule, the cost of marketing and selling would be 30 to 50%. It may be even more in any product. Okay, are you considering that in your cost? And not only just cost, but also how are you spending that money? How are you going to create that market for yourself? Does that kind of answer some part of your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so as scientists and technologists and others, we tend to assume that the market is there for us. I can tell you, as an entrepreneur and who has made more mistakes than most people, I can tell you that marketing is more important. It is the customer who finally sees value. Okay, it's not my technology that sees value. So I have to see how will the customer see value in what I do, and it must be of value to the person, not just a general good from the society point of view also, because you're getting into a commercial area, so you have to think commercially. In fact, I had coined a word called techno bania, or a phrase rather, techno. So you have to think like a technologist, etc., but you have to also think like a bania. You have to make, how will I make money, where is my money going to come from? So we can have a lot of interesting discussion, and there'll be a lot of learning for each of us, even from this point also. But it's important, definitely important. uh, So I'm glad you have raised this question. We will see if we can answer it more specifically also, but I give a very general answer right now. So
Uh,
question
Thank you, sir.
is, yeah, sorry, who
Thank
is
you,
this?
sir. I will
Yeah,
ask
welcome.
further questions as
I
we proceed.
mhm. I
Anybody
just have
else?
Mr. Agastya, Rahul here. Just wanted to add 4 points here.
Yeah.
So when we do the market analysis, the
Hmm.
more important thing, what I understand is like first is the industry overview. That what is the current state of your industry and where it is actually headed. Second is the target market. Who are your actual customers? You should actually detail about how many of them are there, what is their needs, and describe their demographics. Third is the competitions. So, who are your competitors? What is their positioning in the market, their strength and weakness in comparable to you? And fourth is the pricing and forecast, what I understand.
Yeah.
So, your pricing generally will help determine how your position and your company is there in the market. And then your forecast that which portion of the market you are going to get through. So these are the 4 points. If you really focus, that will help you for the market assessment kind of.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. I think you've given a more structured answer to this point. Industry growth is very important. If you have a product which is going into a market which is mature or which is declining, then you will have much greater competition also. And so, therefore, you have to look at what we learned in marketing as four P's: product, position, price, and promotion. I don't know, I've forgotten that. So, Rahul can probably correct me on that. Four P's of marketing are there. So, you have to look at all the four. Now they talk about six P's also, I think. Yeah. So I come back to this point. I own the proposal comes out very distinctively in the way I have presented the proposal. So I can actually make out in when reading a proposal whether the proposal is a slightly tentative one, slightly a self doubt is in the minds of the writer, or there is a level of overconfidence in the writer. All that I can make out by reading a proposal, and I'm sure most of you can also do it if you apply your minds to doing that. It just needs to focus on what is being said, what is not being said. Then is it too general or is it too specific? Both are dangerous. You have to look at seeing where is the balance that you have to strike. Then there will be more clarity for the reader. Is there adequate data provided for appreciation of the need of the project? Is it adequate? Is it? Am I giving just what is required? Am I giving too much? Both. If I give more, I might obfuscate or confuse the reader, and I might get bored of it also. Is the project idea well thought through? The project idea I'm talking about will be what will come after this also. How the what and the how are they well thought through? So focus on, have I seen through the whole project? The one example I used to give people actually, do you have a killer instinct about the whole project? That killer instinct should be seen in your proposal that I am going to do it. So, how do you do that? Only when you see through it. The example of a killer instinct is you have to be able to do a dry run and say that I've done the dry run, this is how it is. So, everybody know that you are going to kill. Is the outcome clear and measurable? Yeah, all this we have talked quite often. One most important thing, is there an outside to inside thinking? Am I seeing it from the ONGC point of view, CSR funding, or am I seeing it from my technology, my way of doing things, and my city and so on? So this is all these I think are very important to bring in clarity.
Priya would like to add something.
Yeah, okay,
Priya?
sure.
Mr. Agastya, my question is on with respect to the first point here in terms of ownership of the proposal.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of us as clusters, we facilitate projects. There are some projects where we have a very big role in implementation, but there are projects where we are facilitators. When I say facilitators, our specific role could be fund management, program management, project management, making sure that we have, if more partners are needed, we get them on board. But we are leveraging strengths of, say, 5, 6 partners to execute the project. We've got a feedback from certain funding agencies that our role in the project is therefore not clear because we are not positioning ourselves as a implementing a body. How do we address this?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's a point on which we probably have to get into how we are assigning the role in the project itself. That's what I'm saying. When a person reads a proposal, he can or she can make out what is the role that the proposer is holding in in this project, and that role needs to be defined more clearly. Of course, it depends again on the limitations of the organization, limitations of the strengths of people, etc. But the sense of ownership does not require more resources. The sense of ownership is that I will deliver, which again I'll request you to go through the project thinking process that I'm going to cover now, where if you have thought through many of these things that I will present in the project, then it will become a little more clear that at the proposal stage, I've actually gone through how to execute it. And that how is quite clear to me, which means I know where are the pitfalls, where are the risks, and so on. So when you have done that kind of homework, the agency would be able to identify that actually they are in safe hands. Somebody is giving them enough confidence to go ahead with the proposal.
Okay, thank
So
you.
how much of the how part of it, the project part of it, I have gone through is a process by which you can demonstrate this. Okay. Shall I go to the next slide?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So clarity to through answering the how. So this is the next part of the whole workshop. When can I feel that I'm on top of the project? I think this is almost the kind of question that you asked in a slightly different way. So I'll talk about project thinking. Project management is a recognized framework. For those of you who are not familiar with project management, etc., first understand that it is a recognized framework, and therefore it is necessary, and it is a framework which is quite solid in terms of the way people have practiced it and brought back the practice into textbooks and guides and all that. So it's a framework and approach to sharing the management and communication methods. So remember this: how am I going to manage the project? How am I going to communicate? Which is very important, because in project management you're going to communicate, and the people outside your organization are interested in it. So you have to know how to communicate also. So project management actually talks about both management and communication methodologies. So it's all both are built into it, and there is of course a time frame, etc. The second thing which is very important for particularly in a business situation is that the project management is the basis for the contract. So when two parties write the contract, like ONGC CSR funding group and your cluster, when you sign the contract, the base or the core is the project. So on and around the project, you will have all the legal and statutory conditions and all that. But funda is that it's all about project management. We must recognize that responsibilities are clearly understood. That's why project management is very important. Who is doing what? What actor is responsible for what? If you want to get another parallel, I think it's just like directing a theater production. You have to be very clear which actor is going to do what on stage and how many of the people at the background are going to do what and when. Timing is also very critical. I had an experience of seeing a drama where a person was shot and he was dead. The actor was supposed to be lying down, but the person who was supposed to pull the screen did not pull the screen in time, and this guy got up because his eyes were closed, and everybody had a good laugh. So timing is very important, and responsibilities had to be clearly understood and executed accordingly. And now I'm just posing this question. I just wrote this question in the morning because I didn't know which slide to put it in, so I put this. Suppose you're making a presentation to the team that is approving your project or your proposal, and they say, I think we like your project, we like you and your organization for what you're doing and what you like to do. But we want to reduce your funding by X percent, whatever, 20%, 30%, 10%, whatever it is. Have you thought through the project to look at what scenarios will I have with different funding levels, and how can I give an answer to this? How can I respond to this? Maybe you can buy time and say, I'll come back to you, but that's a smart way of doing it. But I think a better way to do it is to get them to sign when they are saying that we are ready to sign. No, so you have to say, I think these are the things that can be probably thought of as a separate project. So how do I divide this project into 2, 3 different things and then offer it to them and then just do the cut paste thing on the proposal and give it back to them. So you have to be able to come up to this level actually of thinking. How is project management thinking different is also important because what is so special about it? And I believe that one of the important things is it is a set of planned activities. It is one of set of planned activities. So it's not a production or it's not a thing. Even a research project is a project, but I want to emphasize here that it is a set of planned activities. That means the extent of planning is much greater because it needs coordination of different agencies and different actors. You will see the impact of poor project planning very easily. Somebody makes a nice road and after 2 days somebody digs for a telephone line or for a water line or something. Very clearly there is no project management involved because each thinks like a department. So the opposite of project management thinking, if you want to understand project management better, is compartmental and departmental thinking. Okay. So, and then the other thing is specified outcome. At the end of the project, there is an output. For example, we are taking a spacecraft to the moon. So very clear it has to land in the moon. It's a very specified outcome. So there are no debates about is the outcome okay, is it 50% achieved, all that is not there. The outcome is very clear. It is either 0 or 100 only, nothing in between. There must be agreement on the outcome and the processes. So the project management process and therefore the proposal must facilitate agreement on the outcome and the processes between the two parties involved. As I referred to in the previous slide also, I think we must be able to build up a project, a larger project, into a summation of or a synthesis of a number of large projects. Synthesis of a number of smaller projects or sub projects. This way you can look at funding, time management, resource management, management of management itself also. Project thinking further helps one to see through the steps, and I think I keep repeating this. Another reason when we talk about it is there has to be transparency in the project management. Okay, we have to be transparent because we are dealing with somebody else who's giving us the money. So they need to know how good we are in taking care of their money, their resources, and guarding their own value in the market, etc. So we have to be transparent, identify the points of likely failure and contingencies possible. So we have to take ownership of this. When I take ownership, to answer that question back, coming to ownership, do I look at what are the likely failures and do I have a backup plan for each of this? This is also an evidence that we are thinking from the funding agency's point of view. So very simply, a universal project management process, you will get it in any the Google search, etc. This is just like we talked about the proposal making. Here is life cycle of a project management: initiation, plan, organize, implement, and control. So we are talking about in proposal making up to planning, initiation and planning actually. So you must understand that already proposal making is a part of the project execution in that sense that we are already into the project. If you want to look at all of project management in one slide, again, this is one slide and you have to look at it from the bottom. So have a clear charter and scope, create the milestone events, create the criteria for acceptance of the result, the milestone events, what should be delivered. And then from there, you break it up into the activities. This would be called a work breakdown structure. If we can even understand up to this point, and if we can cover most of these in our proposal, I think we would be giving the people a greater confidence in what we are doing. So this integrated approach to project management, if you want to call it, or a master planning of the project is like the Bible of the project execution. This is a document. It will be documented because others had to see it, review it, and refer to it. Remember, you might be making a proposal, but somebody else may be executing it. What do they have a reference? They can't reinvent the project in their minds again. And the idea is that they don't reinvent, because then they may do things differently from what you have conceived in the original concept of the project. So you have to see that this becomes a guide, a living guide to the people who are executing the project. All scheduling cost problems, I can assure you that when there are delays, when there are cost variations in the project, it's all because we didn't do some of these things right somewhere. So if you can do this better, you'll have less of these problems actually. I'll explain this slide a little bit now. Scope. And I've been using this word scope quite a lot in these 2 days. Scope is, it's very important to say what is included in our project, and also to mention what is not included in the project. Exclusions must make it clear that this is what we are not doing. In fact, a lot of management is all about deciding what not to do. So we must be able to, same thing about proposal making also. Please be clear what I will exclude, what I will include. Then it becomes easier that we make a proposal itself quite trim and slim and lean actually, if you want to use that word. Assumption should be stated explicitly. So again, I've talked about it. When I start saying, what am I assuming in writing this? What are the assumptions? It starts to make me think, am I taking some things for granted? So I should not take things for granted is what this message is about. The scope must tell me that these are the assumptions based on which I am doing this work. Scope helps to minimize waste. That's exactly why we had to be very careful about making the scope. And you can look at 1 or 2 scenarios and decide why this is the best scope for your particular project that you have in mind. So it helps us to be precise. In I'm just tempted actually. I'm just looking at the clock. Would you all like to take a few minutes, let's say 5 minutes, to write a scope statement in less than 3 sentences? Make an attempt on whatever concept note or your other proposal that you have prepared. Just take, because you're familiar with your own document, you don't need to think too much. But I want you to write the scope which a person in ONGC, CSR will read and understand as well as you have understood it. That means it is very straightforward that the scope is understood. So then we can go to the next part of the discussions. So can you take 5 minutes only? Write it down for yourself. It's 10:45. Sorry. It's 10:45 on my laptop time, so 10:50 we will get back. In the meanwhile, I'll do a little bit of work on my laptop.
5 minutes in advance to 10.
My laptop, that's why I'm. It's warmer today also.
Yes.
See this feedback form. You have 1 minute to go. If you're through, you can raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Are you through? Can I hear some scope statements?
Yes. Mr. Sheikh, you can
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I am Nigule Bahar Sheikh from ProBiochem India, Bhubaneswar cluster. So my project title is Rice Husk Conversion to Value Added Product. So here my scope is setting up a pilot plant for production of silica and cellulose from rice husk, chaff and stubble collected from farmers and rice mill. And the second is generating local employment. And the third is reducing environmental pollution caused due to rice husk burning.
Okay, great. Now let's just ask you a question from a general perspective. I won't say ONGC, CSR and all that. Which would be more important for ONGC, CSR?
Uh, Reducing the environmental pollution
Yeah,
uh, in the local area
yeah,
and generating local employment.
yeah. So those outcomes is what outcomes would be what they would be looking for, let's say.
Right,
So will your proposal look a little different when you look at that part of it?
right, sir. These two will be more strongly.
Yeah, which means your measurement of impact, all that, baseline, all that also we'll have to look at that.
Right.
So you understand. So this is just a very nice example. I'm glad you shared this. It's a nice example to say if I can get my scope clear, then I probably can direct my proposal also into a better shape actually.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So just an example given. We could have more discussions, but I will proceed. But I assume that you had some understanding of how important and how critical it is to. Sorry. How critical it is to look at the scope at the early stage of the proposal making. So I'm going to reshare my screen. Sorry. Bharat, I'm on a call. I can't answer your call. I'm on a training. program, no? So the charter. So what is a charter? If you ask me if I can make the charter, I've already made the proposal, almost everything of it. Okay, but it's not so easy. So charter must present a sense of completeness or wholeness of what I'm presenting, what my project is all about. So value added without conditions. That means this is it. That's the kind of feeling that a person must see in the proposal. This is it. There are no conditionalities, if this, if that happens and all that. This is the complete thing. Despite all these conditions, this is what you are going to get from this project. And it ties up both the client and the cluster, for example, in this case. So a charter is actually a way of looking at it from the looking at presenting the whole proposal from the point of view of the receiver of the project. So if you look at it from that and make the understanding clear, then I think clarity, all those questions are already answered by the process that we follow. And again, the charter is a reference document in the contract making, in the everywhere else also. Okay. And if there are disputes, then there must be something wrong in the way we have looked at the charter. So you can look at where do disputes come from. Maybe I thought so and you thought so, and all that is what will be the reason for that. So what I would like you to look at is, how can I think from this point of view and say, is there a possibility that some points can be misinterpreted because they come from a different approach and we come from a different approach. So again, think through every sentence virtually the way we are writing it, so that we avoid misinterpretations. We must be clear, and one way to avoid misinterpretations is to have as much of the assumptions as possible on the board. So minimum requirements in the charter. So in the CSR case, it must address all it must address the CSR case, which means, like we talked about, pollution. So pollution reduction or employment generation. So can we write that this project is about these two aspects of it, and this is the location in which so the scope actually becomes very clear through all this. It's starting itself, and the need for this project. So when I talk about the business case or the CSR case, we are talking about the need which is being addressed, and the need why we should be the people who should be doing it. And then, of course, key stakeholders. I'm not going to talk too much on key stakeholder management specifically, but I am sure that you will understand that stakeholder management is a key part of project management. But for lack of time, I'm not going to cover that. So you look at this list of things that I've included. If you put all this, I think your proposal is almost ready. If you want a heading for some of the paragraphs and all that. Since the slide will be with you, I'm not going to read it. I've been able to. If you have any questions, you can ask me about it.
Hi, sir. This is Jagjit from Delhi Knowledge Cluster.
Yes, Jagdit, yeah.
Sir, yesterday also we had discussed some of these points,
Yeah.
and we have included that as a part of our proposal.
Okay.
But I'm just wondering that does this go in the charter separately, like in the beginning, in a short form, something, and then it again repeats in the project proposal in an elaborate way?
No, I think let's try to understand. Maybe I have created the confusion. This charter is a project management jargon. Okay, it is used in project management context because it is understood properly when people talk about charter. As far as you are concerned, I think it's very simple. The proposal is our charter,
Okay.
to keep it simple, so we don't confuse many things actually.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Now, when we're talking about assumptions, I wanted to be a little clear about it because I felt that there is a possibility that assumptions can also include some things that can be wishful thinking. So assumptions are based on certain measurable parameters and trends very clearly. What is the rainfall in this region? What are the number of students we are going to deal with? What is the inflation? Some assumption, some whatever you want to make. These are all things where the measurement. Now, visual thinking is that I'm presuming things that have no reality, that are not real. So there's small spelling mistake here. So if some assumption is made but which is infeasible, then it is wishful thinking. Are you clear? So we have to distinguish in our minds between, am I getting into the wish mode? I wish I had all this, I wish I had this and all that. Or is there a clarity that actually this is an assumption, a safe assumption to make? And if that assumption changes, the project may change in some form, but ultimately the goal could still be reached, but probably with a higher cost or a little more time or something. So this is again something that we have to be aware of. The wishful thinking can be, I mean, we may not state it, but we may have a wishful thinking that ONGC CSR will just give us funds. But that's not true anyway. They're going to give us funds only which they want. So we should be very clear that just, I mean, a sense of some wishful thinking will give a reviewer a feeling that the person is not thinking through this properly. So if wishful thinking becomes a substitute for making assumptions, and assumptions is hard work, it's not easy. I just pulled out from somewhere from an Excel sheet, so you'll see this format of this slide is very funny actually. I had prepared an Excel sheet projecting some cash flows for a project. So I just pulled out from there and said, let me see how the assumptions will look like. So the cash flow will be self-sustaining after 4 years is not really an assumption. This is the kind of target I set for myself when I was doing it to see whether it works or not. So I was testing this assumption actually on the Excel sheet by looking at various parameters and all that. So the assumption is revenue inflow to the project from operations is based on expansion of usage of the portal through intensive marketing and sales efforts at local levels, which means I'm assuming there'll be intensity in the marketing and sales efforts. And because of that, there'll be an expansion in the usage of the portal. In order to do this, I have to create a whole set of activities to make it happen. So I have to convert some of this into what are the actionable points in the operation of the whole project. New user volume is expected to increase at 30% per quarter from quarter 6 and is expected to taper and reduce 50% from year 4. So I'm just giving you a sample or a taste of or a flavor of what kind of assumptions will help us to make our projections better. Each of these assumptions will go into my Excel sheet for calculating certain things. And therefore, these assumptions actually have an impact on the way my financial statement is looking, and I can test it whether if this assumption goes wrong by so much percentage, what will happen to my financials. So I can do a sensitivity analysis where it is required. So that's a way we have to look at assumptions. You can ask me if you have any doubts or questions on this. You will see that now we are drilling down in the details in the assumptions. I'm not talking about the broader level assumptions at the very top, which are important, which nevertheless have to be stated. It's at the drilling down that the assumptions become even more crucial, and in the how part of the whole proposal. Now I'll go to milestones, and I just picked up a template, and again you will get hundreds of templates. So I'm not the type of person who is prescriptive in the way things should be done. So maybe it's both an advantage and a disadvantage. So this is quite a decent way to present in a proposal project. You can talk about the different stages of the project deliverables, or you can say there are multiple deliverables and this is the timeline and this is how it is. So this is a good thing. So milestones, it's good to put them in a pictorial form. Okay. Because let's understand, the more we put in pictorial form the data, the easier it is for people to understand, grasp, and ask questions and all that. If you want to confuse people, put lots of complex Excel sheets into the proposal. But I can assure you, very few people have the patience to go through the Excel sheets, and they may think that It's for somebody else. So it'll take a longer time to process your proposal. So how do I plan milestones? So some few things. Are the milestones reasonably paced to enable management and timely review? You don't create milestones every 15 days or every month or something. Typically, maybe once in 3 months or 6 months, you have reached a milestone. That brings me to a very important point. Now, should my project planning be a monthly plan? Should it be a quarterly plan? Should it be a yearly plan? What is an ideal planning cycle time for a project? Okay. My experience, and I've learned it over the years, is that ideally a good project plan and scheduling system must look at weekly schedules. And one of my ex-bosses actually told me why it is important. If you have a monthly plan and a schedule, then you're talking about monthly reviews. That means you will have 12 opportunities to correct if mistakes happen. Whereas if you have a weekly review, you can have 52 opportunities to correct. So it's simple logic, and I love that logic actually. And I've seen that most international projects and all that, people look at weekly reviews. Of course, the weekly review can be just an internal process. It doesn't have to be that you report every week or something, but it helps you to review even more efficiently and more effectively than the funding agency would review you. So you have a better chance to correct things. So coming back to milestones, I would say once in 3 months or 6 months, or in an overall project of 3 to 6 years, maybe 5 to 10 milestones would be significant and important for you. Are the milestones serving as points for dispersal of funds for further work? So you must understand the importance of milestones. Milestone is I have completed this milestone, so I am due so much money because I have spent so much of resources and all that. Of course, you will get something in advance. So by the time you complete the first advances that you have received, you should be able to complete your milestone and get the next funding. So there is some level of smartness in the way you put the funding points so that you can actually get funded without having to delay the project because the funds have not been cleared. Are milestone points clear and irreversible? To me, this is very important about milestone. The moment you have reached a milestone, it is like I have reached a new plateau. I am not going to fall off from here. I'm going to go forward, which also means that the criteria for how I've reached the milestone must be crystal clear, and they must ensure that no rework is required to go back and do something to correct where I should have reached in the milestone. So that is something that we have to understand. Will an independent agency or funding agency have the capability to assess? That means it must be quite simple. It should not be too complex. I might have to do all the donkey's work for doing it. But at the end of it, the independent agency must see something tangible, visible, which is the way they will assess us whether we reach the milestone. In fact, if you look at all these interesting events that are held to invite politicians and other important stakeholders in any large project like foundation stone laying, it's a good milestone to start with, and then the inauguration of the building or something. These are all physical milestones, but they are important because they show that there is a tangible achievement. And again, you have to describe, if I am opening if I am commissioning a machine or an equipment, that marks that I've overcome all the teething problems of installing and debugging the equipment and all that. So commissioning is also a good point we can talk about. But then the following work that comes after this makes it even more interesting and a little more difficult also. We are at 11 o'clock. So what I'll do is I'll cover these milestones work and we can take a break, short break for 10 minutes. Okay. Milestones are significant points or events in a project. That goes without saying almost by now. They're usually linked to part payments. We already talked about it. They're points of review. So before you go and ask somebody, please come and cut the tape and come and inaugurate or come and say a few words and all that, you must have a review with the person. They can become stage gates. Of course, it may not be very relevant in CSR funding, but it's possible that we come to a stage in the project where we had to say we had to spend more money. Okay, we had to look at fresh funding and so on. So we can say at this milestone, we'll review how we will deal with the future funding on this. Maybe it opens the gates for newer opportunities. So we'll have to talk about it. So the stage gate is a term that is used to say that there's a decision maker at the stage gate, independent of those involved in the project, who will review all the conditions that have been set and say whether it is worth proceeding further or close the gate and say the project can be closed also. So we have to we can build this kind of a thing also. For example, a stage gate at the at the exit stage of the closure stage of the project also makes sense, because then you can start opening gates for a new set of funding for new projects and so on. A milestone doesn't take time. Milestone is reached, full stop. It is not an activity by itself. Although conducting the event around it is will have a lot of activities as part of the project. Is milestone consumes zero time, and obviously a charter will have to show all this to the funding agency. Another way to show these milestones would be to look at linear point and say that this is milestone A, this is that, and so on. And you can talk about gates in between also, so that there are review points which are also made visible to people. Another format which I liked on my milestones, which may be useful for the review stage of the project, would be mention the milestone, the target date, and then status and comments. So you can actually have this kind of a report for the whole project also, just milestone based review. Unless the reviewer says, no, no, I want every month a report on all the activities and so on. Otherwise, for a reviewer who is maintaining an arm's length from the execution, I think a milestone based review. But again, I'll put this point, the status reporting must be fairly transparent and clear. I've seen some projects where till September 2013 milestone will be met was a comment. In the end of September 2013, the comment is it will take 6 months more. Okay, it's I mean, obviously people have not taken this reporting seriously. So my urge to you is that when you make these kinds of things, you also have to be serious about how we review it, how we assess the status, and so on. Okay, I think I'll come to this point later. Let's take a break.
Yes,
If you have a few questions, you can ask.
I just have a one point to add it here,
Yeah,
Rahul. So, like, based on my experience from other ministries, so what we used to do is, along with the milestone and all this target date status,
yeah,
we used to also write it there that if review is happening from the reviewer point, if review is happening at that milestone, what they are able to see.
yeah,
So very measurable outcomes.
yeah,
So we used to add one more column there as a deliverables, that once if you are coming after 6 months and reviewing this, I will be able to see very measurable outcomes, like okay, if 50 or 100 samplings has been done, or this many teachers has been trained. So what is the measurable outcome we used to also give at this stage?
exactly.
So
I
from the
think
reviewer
that's
perspective.
very true. I think that's a good point that we can include also. What are the tangible measures at each milestone? Okay, so we'll take a break now. We'll take a 10-minute break. Is it okay? Or you want 15 minutes break?
10 minutes is fine, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
10 minutes, is it?
Yeah, we'll come back 10 minutes. Shall we start? I'm ready to start.
I think we can start.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, can we just quickly have you look at reflecting on what we covered till now in the morning? Go back to the, I'll put this reflection forms over here. Take 3-4 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Sheikh, you can. Mr. Sheikh, do you have any queries? You can ask. You have to unmute yourself, I think.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Sheikh.
This is regarding the reflection questions and answers.
Yeah,
I'll give some examples of the answers to those queries.
yeah, okay, thank you.
So what insights I got about writing the proposals? To know more about the ONGC CSR goals and related activities, to align the scope of the proposal to that of ONGC CSR goals, to draw the structure of the proposal, amounts of data and details to be provided that meets the attention and interest of the reviewer and the decision maker. The next is what insight I got about writing the proposals. I shall clearly outline the scope of the project, highlighting the shared purpose. I shall clearly state what the project is about and why the project is important to ONGC CSR. I shall highlight the system and subsystems that would be built into the project to make it self-sustainable after exit of ONGC funding. What will I stop doing or do differently in writing the proposals? I'll not make the proposal look fragmented, not interconnected. I'll not make the proposal individualistic. The proposal will adhere to the context and to the central idea at all times, not to overburden the reviewer with the voluminous data and details.
Yeah, thank you. I think you have covered a lot of ground actually. Thank you. Helps to refresh also whatever we have covered so far. Thank you very much. There is an exercise we can do now of trying to create the milestones for the proposals, our respective proposals and concept paper.
Yes.
I think I can give about 5 minutes. You think 5 minutes is enough? Make an attempt to put the milestones, keep it as tangible as possible, and see how a reviewer can come actually and see something tangible in that thing. So I'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay, sir.
If you're finished, you can raise your hand. We'll have a minute to go.
Yes, Mrityunjay.
Yes, sir. Can I speak on?
Yeah, except there's some noise in the background. I don't know from where it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're,
Is it fine now?
yeah, it
Yeah.
will
So
be a little louder.
yeah. So just let me open my. I have prepared a slide. Should I share the slide or I just?
Yeah, if you can
Hello.
share your slide, it's fine.
Okay, sir. Just give me 1 minute then.
So in the meanwhile, if somebody wants to say what did this exercise force you to do? Yes, Dr. Jagjeet.
Hi, sir. Disha here from Pune Knowledge Cluster. Am I
Okay.
audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so at least the insight, the very striking point for me to take from the workshop was that think from the CSR's point of view, because a lot of the times we feel how great our proposal or idea is, and we try to bring them on board. But instead, if they have any objectives or agenda, how to bring them in synergy or think like them, like wherever they are going to get benefits, either in publicity, visibility, or in terms of any causes. So that was a striking learning for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I was talking about these milestones specifically. When you think milestones, what does it force you to do a little differently?
Hello, sir. This is Jagjeet from DKC.
Yeah.
Sir, what it is helping me align the entire proposal into some form. For instance, some milestones we have in our objectives, like we will have training, STEM labs, etc. So we put that in the diagram. Some of them we have in our work breakdown structure. So it is kind of aligning it into a particular direction, which is quite helpful.
True. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You can put up your presentation, no?
Yeah, Prachi, would you like to say?
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask that in milestones, see, normally whatever we put in objectives and in the time frame, like timelines for a particular proposal. So most of the points, it's like for milestone, it is a combination of all of this. Like there would be repetition of points when we talk about milestone. So I just wanted to ask that what should be the focus in our mind when we write milestones for a project? Would it be more towards the time frame or timelines on that lines?
It's a very good question. I've gone through a little bit of struggle, so I can share with you that interesting experience
Okay.
actually.
Yeah.
Um, See, this milestone is making you think about the project, not about the time. We are looking
Yes.
at, you will see as we go through the logic of what I'm presenting, that the time is an outcome of the kind of milestones and activities we need to carry out for the project. So if you want to distinguish between these two activities, you have to say first I'm doing planning, then I'm doing scheduling. Okay,
Hmm.
schedule includes cost, time, and all that. So we are actually breaking up the whole idea into a planning thinking and a scheduling thinking. Now, the
Yes.
planning thinking is not easy for most of us because we used to only time thinking actually. When I say give me a
Hmm.
plan, we'll give a time frame actually, time-based
Yeah.
plan, right? We have to actually segregate the two and say that let's do planning. Planning is thinking, simple. Let's do thinking.
Hmm.
Okay, after we have done that, then we'll calculate what is the time required, what are the essential activities and all that. So you're actually doing a bottom-up process in terms of saying that let's get to the brass tacks of what activities are required and then build upon it how much time it will take.
Okay.
So that's actually the big difference that we will get out of doing this. Even if you do it only 20% right, I can tell you there'll be a lot of quality in the work that you're doing actually.
Okay.
But we have to
Also,
guard ourselves. So we have to observe that I'm actually not doing scheduling, I'm doing only planning. You tell yourself consciously that.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, got the point. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so where is the slide? Mrutyunjay was supposed to put up the milestone thing, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mrityunjay, can you just share this slide?
No, this is about the reflection. I'm talking about the milestones actually. This is useful. I mean, this is important also. Would you like somebody else to talk about the milestones? I don't need to see it. I mean, you can even share with us what the milestone is. What are the milestones you got out of your for your project? If it's taking a little longer, we'll come back to it. There's no absolute need that we should see it. As long as everyone has done the work on the milestone, I think we are okay. But sharing would definitely help us. Uh, so before I start off, can I ask all the people to come on the video format so that I think Rahul, we wanted to take some picture of all the participants, no? How would you like to do that?
Yes, yes, we can do it.
Yeah, if all of you can come on the video, we'll have some. After all, this is a tangible part of our, so it's a milestone kind of thing that we have met together and all that. So we need to have uh, a picture of this. And if some of you are on a mobile or something, or you can take the screenshots, that will be nice. You can share it.
But Mrityunjay, can you just unshare your screen? Can you just unshare your screen so that we get a full box? Thank you.
Yeah, so I do not know how to move from one screen to another because probably the number of participants will require more screens and all that. Somebody with mobile probably can do it better. Not too sure. Okay, we'll see. Maybe at the end we can still try. If we are not looking too tired, we can probably look fine at the end also. I'll start back
You
my
can click on the large gallery.
large gallery, is it? Okay. I don't know where is the large gallery.
It is on the three dots just below your,
Yeah, I know. Full screen, is
Uh,
it?
yeah,
Mr.
no.
Anand,
You
I have
just
taken.
on the three dots by the side of the share button, there is a, pop-up menu that comes in. In
Yeah.
that, below the gallery, there is a large gallery preview.
No,
So you
in
can do that.
mine it is coming as a show device settings, show call details, enter full screen.
I have taken it. I have taken it.
Okay, if one of us has taken, it's fine. I don't need to take it. Okay, thank you. So I'll go back to my presentation. So we were here on the milestones. And so now the logic is, I'll go back to that single sheet, single slide part of it. So here we have covered charter and scope, and then we have covered milestone events. So we'll do something about criteria for acceptance. I don't have a clear separate slide for that. Uh, See, each milestone must be measurable, tangible, and it must fulfill certain criteria that this is what is the deliverable, and the criteria has to be set. So when you write down the milestones, you have to actually have another schedule which says for each of these milestones, these are the things that should be met. These conditions should be met. So this criteria for acceptance is not an activity which will be there, but the next level for each criteria to be met, I have to do the following. So that is where the activities required to meet the criteria are coming. I want you to spend a little time thinking about it, because this is where that level of abstraction is going a little, it is going drilling down into the details. So if one of you can take up one milestone, then we can try to work on that as an example and go for what is the criteria for acceptance. And then we can look at what activities are required. So anybody who wants to volunteer on that can unmute and tell us, take this milestone for me, and then we can figure out how to do it.
I want to. May I start one? I'm Mrityunjay.
Okay, sure, Mrityunjay. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, yesterday, as you nicely said about the alignment with the ONGC, I found one thing that they have in the methane with global initiative. They are in one of the part into. I want to include this milestone as to quantify how to reduce the methane by using water bodies to as a measurable milestone basically. So how should I execute that?
That will be a separate question. We'll have to take it separately. But can we focus on this thing that if you have written down the milestone, then we will go to this step criteria. But I'll come back to your question, because I think otherwise we'll get slightly sidetracked in this at this point in time. Okay, I'll come to that point.
Sir, can I share?
Yeah, sure.
So, for instance, if we are planning to have 4 teacher training workshops in the 3-month period, that will be a milestone if we cover that. So,
Yeah. So again, it's a very good example for us to understand what is a milestone, what is not a milestone. Okay. We must say completion of 4 workshops for so many teachers. You cannot say doing 4 workshops. If you see the defined difference between these two, and I said, and milestone doesn't have any time. It doesn't take time at all. It's the end of a series of activities. So we actually say that we do a series of activities to conduct 4 workshops. And therefore, the final thing is that so many teachers graduate from this. Let's say we call it a graduation program or something. So the milestone is graduation of teachers who have trained. All right. So in order to graduate them, what are the activities? So what is the criteria for acceptance? That they have all attended this program for this workshop. They have also passed some test or something. They have also demonstrated their ability by taking some classes, and they have been reviewed by somebody, whatever. So you put all those as criteria for acceptance. Okay. So there is a formal process of verifying whether they have actually graduated, just like any college graduation process.
yeah, right.
Okay. So having done that, then you say the event the milestone is that there is a graduation ceremony. I mean, you can, I'm just making it easy for us to understand. It need not be that, it can just be sending the certificates by email.
Yeah, certification can be done.
Yeah, all of them, or the results are announced on this on the website. It can be any milestone actually.
Okay, sir.
So does that clarify first of all the milestone event, how it has to be looked at? It is the end of a set of activities, and it needs to have a criteria for acceptance that this is what will be done before this is declared as a completion.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
So
in order to, sorry, go ahead.
So what I got is that we can write the total number of teachers as a completion thing with certification in the milestone.
Yes.
And then the process for that in the criteria for acceptance.
Yeah. So from the criteria for acceptance, you go to the next one, which is the activities required to meet the criteria. That means first I have to design a workshop. I have to design the contents for the workshop. I select teachers to attend that workshop. A whole series of activities. Just like for conducting this workshop, we had a series of activities. Okay. Now, those are the parts which we call the work breakdown structure. I just given them blocks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So activities to fulfill this criteria become the tasks that we have to carry out. And each task could be carried out by different agencies, different people, or the same people, etc. All that has to be defined.
Okay.
Is that okay? Are you all clear how we arrive at the activities that are required to be carried out for each milestone? So when you put all the milestones and put therefore all the criteria for acceptance and therefore all the activities required to carry out, then you have a whole set of project activities. That is the skeleton of your plan of the entire project. That skeleton is called a work breakdown structure.
Okay, sir. Got it.
Okay. Now, only when you have created a structure are you ready to start to look at how much resources are required, how much time is required, and how much money is required. Three basic inputs. And that is what you have to communicate to the funding agency in a manner in which they all understand it. A project can have 1,000 activities also. So how do we communicate it in the simplest format? So we can talk about milestones, and we can talk about how the milestones are going to cost so much money, etc. So ultimately, a work breakdown structure chart will look like this. And I've just taken something because I'm an engineer and I get something simple. I put this together. This can
Sir,
be a
if you're sharing slides, they are not visible.
okay. So I'm sorry. That means I have not done my job of no. Maybe it's gone off somewhere else. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I think I didn't share it after the interruption we had. Yeah. Thanks for that. It also tells me that my audience is not sleeping. Okay, so now I think it's clear. Do you want to go back to that slide which I had projected, imagining that you were, or making an assumption that you are seeing the screen on that milestone and all that?
Yeah, just to get a quick.
Yeah, I think I had to refresh you with that. I'm sorry I made that assumption. All right, so this is a pictorial thing, charter and scope, milestone events, and the criteria for acceptance. This may not figure in any particular set of reports you send to the uh, agency, the funding agency. May be required, may not be required, but this is an important link actually, because the criteria decides what you will do. So this is what they will look for, what are the activities and so on. But the activities must build in the quality of the whole project through this criteria for acceptance. Okay, and these activities are the ones that I'm going to show you now in this slide, how it will look like in any project. And those of you who are familiar with MS projects or any other equivalent project management software would know that these are the things that you would actually enter into the Excel-like sheet or page on that software. So you have a set of activities, you give them a number or a name or something, and then the description of what the activity is, which is easy for that owner, process owner to understand. So one more column we must add, and it is there in the Excel, in the software, is who is responsible for this activity. So the accountability in the responsibility chart also gets created by just adding another column with the person's name or the designation or the organization's name. Now, this is an important thing predecessor event. That means I cannot start B without A being completed. Similarly, I cannot start C without A being completed. So this predecessor predecessor activity is important. Like for example, this particular activity F cannot be done. Inspect and surface finish cannot be done without completing D and E. So this establishes the logical sequence of the whole project. What needs to be done before and after. And this is an estimation of the number of weeks or days or hours of what the project of each activity. Now this is best done by the respective specialist in that field. How much time it takes. Okay. And how many people are required, how much of now this becomes a basis for your costing estimation. So you have two things coming out of this. The duration gives you the time estimate, the resources gives you the cost estimate. It can also be not only personnel, it can be equipments, it can be buses, trucks, whatever you want to use as resources that are important for your activities. So you can have several resources. Now, I'm not sure if we should go more into this detail, but this is the minimum you should be able to produce to a funding agency. But a preferable thing would be to present it through the form of a network like this. This is what comes out of a software, but we in nowadays we used to do all this manually actually for project planning and so on. Now, the key element that you have to understand in this, and there are a lot of jargon in this, I don't want to spend more time on this and make it more confusing. We have to understand that the total duration of this project, okay, which consists of several parallel activities and a series of activities, is determined by the dark lines in this chart, which actually show what we call the critical path of the project. So the critical path, for simplicity, I put the definition here, is the longest duration path. Suppose I go through this and reach here, the total duration will be much less. So I'm going to determine which is the longest path that it takes through this, and this you can do very simply in a software. It just determines what is the critical path. This will tell me what is the total duration of the project. So it is the shortest amount of time necessary to accomplish the project. Are you clear? Why is it important? Because if there's any delay on any of these critical path activities, then it will delay the whole project. Whereas if there's a delay on this, for example, or on any of these other non-critical activities, to the extent that they have a slack or a float, those are the other two jargons that are used. To that extent, they will not be delaying the project duration. So if you are a good project manager, you will only look at whether my critical activities are under control or not. And that is exactly what a funding agency would be interested in. So even saying that the critical path activities are so and so, and these are the people who are managing the critical path, and the review will be done based on the critical path, that is good enough. But I want to put a few points here that you need to be aware of. One is, we have assumed that these time, I'll go back to the previous slide. The duration here is deterministic. We think that it is fixed. This is a very important point that we must all understand. But in real life, these are not so easily deterministic. Unless it is a very, very regular, very defined, very simple task, it's not always easy to have a deterministic estimate. So there is a further complexity which is created in project management, and a whole lot of literature available which talks about how do I look at probabilistic measurement of, estimation of the time. So I can say the mean time is 4 days, but it may be over in 3 days minimum, and it may take 6 days maximum. So I actually create even more complexity in this. But I don't want to complicate your life at this stage unless you want to get into something for your out of your own interest. As far as ONGC is concerned, and I think most organizations are quite happy if you can talk about critical path, and on the critical path you can talk about what are the risks involved, what which may delay the project, which may increase the cost of the project, and so on. So you can look at this. But if you have a broad understanding of what is happening here, then you can look at, if they say, can you reduce this time? You're asking me for 3.5 years, can you reduce it to 3 years? Then we can say which critical activity path activity can I reduce, to what extent can I reduce, can I crash it? The word used is crashing. Okay, can I crash that activity by using more resources or doing things more efficiently? And a lot of inefficiency is built into projects just by this part of the project where we provide more cushions. You ask a department head how much time it takes to do activity A, he would like to not be told that you're delaying things. So he'll add 20% cushion. Okay. And then you go to the project manager, he doesn't want to be caught by all these reviewers and all that. So he says, I'll add another 20%. So that's how we actually build in a lot of inefficiency into project planning, project scheduling, and cost. Now, you have to be aware of this and say, be able to demonstrate that the kind of critical path that I have determined is realistic. It's not padded up too much. Of course, you need to have your padding so that you don't get into trouble due to some uncertainties and all that. But I would like to deal with that separately, not at the initial stage itself. Now, an outcome of this analysis leads you to two things: a time estimate, a time schedule, and a cost schedule. And each of these activities with the starting time and the finishing time should be given to the respective managers or people in research investigators or to the respective subcontractors, so that they know that this is where they have to manage things and there's a price they get out of it. Okay, you want any questions on this? I'm willing to field a few questions so that we clarify points that I might have assumed are not necessary to talk about.
Sir, how do we like what software is this? How do we translate that diagram into this?
Yeah, there is a software which is commonly used, MS Projects. It used to be available for 1 month free. So whenever we wanted to start doing it, we could just do it and use it for 1 month, but only limited options were available. But I think it is worth looking at it.
PS8 is also.
Yeah, PS8 was one of the names earlier. There are others also. I'm sure Rahul and others would know a few more of these projects. But what is important, as I can understand, is not just the software, but the thinking behind how the software runs. And that's what I would like you to be aware of. See, I can give you an output with a critical path. All right, it will give me all the start time, finish times, etc., etc. Fine. But what do I do with it as a manager? What can I do with it when I'm presenting something and somebody asks me a question? That's what I should be able to know about it. Or you employ somebody who's very efficient at doing all these things, and then you see how they can help you to look at the different options that are available. But at the bare minimum, I think talking about your critical path, talking about your critical activities, how you're going to manage and control them is an important part of a reviewer's way of assessing it. For example, if I were to look at a project, I will say which are the A-class items in your critical path. That means the ones that take a lot of time. Maybe the typical Pareto analysis will say that 20% of the activities on the critical path take 70 to 80% of the time. So I'll say, show me those activities which are there, which form the A-class items in the critical path, and show me how you're going to manage them. what are the risks involved in that? So I'll come to that in risk management. If your projects are not very complicated, you can treat each of these milestones as an act. I mean, the reaching from point 0 to milestone 1, milestone 2, milestone 3 can all be taken as activities if there is a single person who is managing each of this, because then you're not communicating to too many people. But then the risk is that you're dependent on that one person for a major part of the project, and it can have consequences of failure. So your management processes will have to be a little different. I'm talking about a very general approach to management. And in a presentation, if you just show them the critical path, then people know, okay, you address some parts of it, but we should not just make a show of it. We should actually do enough homework to say that we have done the thinking. And I'll again go back to this slide to say how actually this is important. Now, the relationship between these through the predecessor needs to be very clearly done. There are possibilities if when you fine tune some of these projects, some work can start even before the completion of A. So maybe you'd like to put A as A1, A2 and say that B1 can start after A1 and B2 can start after A2. So you can actually split some of these things. So a lot of other finer things can be done to make it more efficient. And duration assessment. Maybe you take the longest activity, for example, and say, are you sure you can manage in 6 days? If it is on the critical path, can I say, can I make it 6 days, 6 weeks, and 6 weeks, can I make it 5.5 weeks or 5 weeks? That's where bargaining can happen. Negotiation can happen. So why do you want 6 weeks? Okay, we can again come back to the other question that was asked also later on. I will go to financial soundness, because I think ultimately we are talking about people giving us funds. Okay. And this I said is based, the funds requirement is based on the previous work we have done on the cost, resource estimates and so on. So are all required activities and equipment included in the proposal? So it's good to ask this for yourself and say yes or no, because then you know that you have to do some more homework. Are all the cost estimates based on realistic basis? So I think yesterday also we had discussion about how do we estimate something where there is no quotation available, etc. So we look at realistic means as realistically as feasible and possible at this point in time. Is there any possibility of underestimate or overestimate of quantities, number of people? Particularly in the smaller projects that you're handling, if you estimate 2 people instead of 1 person or 10 people instead of 9 persons, then I think you're still making a significant error in your cost estimates. Are time frames reasonable, or is there excess padding? So when you take more time, you're going to pay people more time for more time, because most of our contracts with people are all time based. You hire a person for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, etc. So you're not going to if you're going to add few months to your estimate somewhere, then you're going to pay more for it. And funding agency doesn't want a person to be sitting idle. It's very simple. If somebody visits you during a review and the person asks, what are you doing? I mean, this is the way people review actually. You just introduce people and then the people say, we are doing this. Right now, what are you doing? No, right now I'm waiting for something to happen. And how long have you been waiting? Maybe 3 weeks. The person will look at you and say, what happened? What's going wrong? Okay. Is there confidence bias or conspiracy of optimism? I think I have a picture for it. I may not have a picture, I'm not sure. All of you who are interested in a little more interesting reading in this area, I would recommend you read some books called Predictably Irrational. And there's, of course, a Bible of this kind of a book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. Some of these books actually have brought out the concepts of behavioral economics, where they talk about actually, while economics talks about a rational being taking decisions in maximizing or optimizing things, in real life, people take decisions which are not optimal. They are quite biased and they are actually more emotional than logical also. So, an overconfidence bias or conspiracy of optimism is when you create a project with some optimistic assumptions, and all other people who support you also fall for that optimism or create their own optimism about the project, and then they create a project where either the time estimate is very small, much against the reality. And example, there's a concept called planning fallacy itself. That's also written by Kahneman in System 1 and Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And these are all the areas where you can look at how we actually make mistakes in estimation. For example, if I had to ask you to say, how much time will you take to write a book? You might say that, okay, I'll take 18 months or 9 months or whatever. But actually, if I give you data that most people who start books don't finish the books, will you still maintain 9 months or 18 months, or will you say that no, I can still finish it? Maybe 20 months I'll take. You will add. So you're already biased by that 9 months or 18 months that you have in your mind actually. And even data doesn't correct make you correct situations. Even when I give data, so all these kinds of fallacies happen in cost estimation also. Uh, One basic thing I think I learned from a very insightful person, I must mention this, is cost is a fact. You can estimate it. Okay. But the more accurate you are in estimating the cost, the better it will be for you when you appear before a funding agency. The moment we create fiction out of estimates, we must be ready for problems. Is revenue dependent on market and the company style? I think this point was talked about actually, and I wrote this point based on reviewing one of the proposals that had come. I think we cannot assume that the market is waiting for us to give business and then they will buy whatever we have. So that's an area of wishful thinking. And as Rahul pointed out also, we have to look at a lot of areas of how is the industry doing, how is the industry going, who are the competitors, and so on. And I think we had to have a lot of work done on the revenue side of it, not just the cost side of it. Similarly, a lot of efforts must be spent on the benefit side of it, estimating the benefits accurately, estimating how the benefits are going to reach the people who are the intended beneficiaries, etc. So this is actually a very important slide, although it's come towards the end. But I think we're going to touch upon important things that will be important for the funding agency. Probably I can talk to you with this simple pictorial matter, a pictorial way of representing things. Now we have a scope, and the scope is given to all the people. So there's a planned work breakdown structure, which we saw how it is created after the milestones and criteria for acceptance are created. And so let's say the investigators and other people involved in it make a cost estimate, which is shown by this amount, X, let's say. Now, the principal investigators probably have to add, or whatever agency, I just given a name here, whoever is there, had to look at known risks, redesign, rework, retesting, whatever other things, there are known risks, and add costs associated. It's not padding up here. I have a risk that this may happen, and this I'll explain to you when I talk about risk management. If this happens, which is likely to happen with a probability of 70%, let's say, and an event which is 70% likely to happen, then I have to have some activities to make up for it. The contingency plans have to be made. I have to take resources, etc. So therefore, I have to build in, and in most financial statements, you will see this as contingency plan. Contingency 5%, 10% we will say. But if you have a basis for making these contingencies based on a proper risk identification and risk management plan, then I think To that extent, you will be appreciated by the funding agency that these risks require so much more contingency, and it need not be an ad hoc figure of 5% or 10%, depends on the level of risk involved. There are still unknown risks, what we call unknown unknowns. These are known unknowns. There could be unknown unknowns. Now here you don't know. Maybe there's a holiday. I mean, there's lockdown, COVID affected. Now it's a known unknown, by the way. But you could have something else that is associated with it. So the top management or the funding agency must be told. Despite this, we would recommend that for some unknown unknowns, you can provide some amount, but we will not come to you for this unless this unknowns really come in. Uh, I think what is that clause called in the this one?
Escalation, cost escalation.
No, not cost escalation. The other one in the contracts we write, no? I forget the Latin name for it, but we'll come to it. I think some of you might have seen it in the contracts. What is acts of God? Acts of God. What is it called?
Acts of God.
Yeah, okay. There's an equivalent to that. So it's an act of God, and then we go to the God who is giving us the funding and say, please help us with it. Okay.
Force majeure.
Force majeure clause. Okay. So this is a force majeure clause. So when you talk about a force majeure clause, you say, I am not responsible when some unknown unknowns happen. And therefore, we'll review the contract at that point separately with the client actually. Template for a financial plan, I'm giving it, some of it may be relevant, some of it may not be relevant, but I think this is the way you can build up your financial plan. Like we talked about overview of the industry, the market, and then products and services, who are the potential users, what is the market size, etc. Then you talk about how am I going to distribute my products and services. I'm looking at it like a marketing exercise, but remember, if I'm creating benefits for people, there's a process by which I have to distribute those benefits, whether I'm educating people or whether I am distributing some other benefits in terms of making available certain things like a lake which is cleaner than before, etc. There is a way of distributing it, and we have to have a strategy for distributing it, and it costs us money. We must be aware of it. Everything costs money, and we have to see how we capture that. Segments segments being addressed. Which part of the market are we touching upon, or which part of the community we are touching upon? How do we select that segment? Why do we select that segment, etc.? Who are the people we have to hire to see that these targets are met, and what are the timelines, therefore how much of time we need to spend, and with these timelines how much of targets will be meet. So it cannot be a one shot that I will suddenly produce 300 tons of some material and then I will sell it overnight in 300 tons. Obviously there will be a non-linear growth in or whatever type of growth that you can plan in your whole project, and that non-linear growth has to be built into your financial plan. Normally we look at linear growth, we'll say every 6 months we'll double the production or something, whatever, but in reality that may not happen, so we have to consider the reality also. The other is, from all these inputs, we create the profit and loss statement, which is called the income statement, and then the income and expenditure statement. And then you create a balance sheet of what are your assets, what are your liabilities, how are you creating assets, and how do you balance the cash flows. You will provide for warehouses and space projections. So how much of cost will that be for as part of capital investment, and then the manpower cost, etc. Then financial plan in terms of, if you're creating, and I think yesterday I just mentioned this, when you have an exit clause and you are saying that we'll sustain this project through the establishment of some agency, then there'll be a shareholding issue, there'll be a cash flow for during the duration of the project, and how will you hand over that balanced cash flow back to the ONGC or whatever it is. All those things had to be understood by the funding agency. So I think we have touched upon time and how to build the time and the fund requirements into the whole project plan. I hope this will help you to see through the project a little more building up from the basics rather than from some numbers being just put across, which any sensitive agency can make out whether it is derived from basics or whether it is almost ad hoc. So if you have any questions, we can take the questions. We can even, if you want, take a break because this has been a slightly heavy session, I think. But it will be useful to have some questions and answers so that we bring more things into the table for discussions. I'll take a pause so that you can maybe, if you want, you can go back to reflections. You can look at writing down what did I learn, and therefore what have I still not understood, what is still not clear to me, etc. But if you are feeling the burden of these two things, I would say it is okay, because if you're doing it first time, it is always going to be difficult, but you don't have to worry. Even small one-time, small shopkeepers do this kind of a thing, except that they do in the head and all that. Here you're only trying to communicate on a piece of paper or on a software, so it could take time. It is definitely complex. But first, not attempting is certainly not what the funding agency will appreciate. If you are attempted and if you have still not been able to make it perfect, that's a starting point for you. We would like to make proposals which are quite weighty in that sense, not in terms of number of pages, but in terms of clarity of why we need so much funds and what would be the time required. If these two numbers are arrived at from the funders, then I think you've got a greater chance of getting appreciated. If there are no questions, I start getting a lot of doubts whether it's become too heavy for people to even raise their hands. And maybe you can talk about what makes it difficult, actually. You can talk about that. Shall we have a break otherwise? You think that will give us some time to breathe and think around?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll take a
Okay.
10-minute break. We'll come back and then we will continue the last session with probably some exercises relating to this, so that we actually start to do some of this, which we'll anyway do in the next few days very quickly. Okay, so we'll come back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Sure, sir.
We'll start it.
You can start.
Yeah. So I'm ready. And others are ready. I can start off.
Yes, sir. Ready, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, what I'd like to do is each one of you can take about 5 minutes for cost estimation and 5 minutes for time estimation. Uh, Better to do the time estimation first and then the cost estimation. You will actually do something like a back of the envelope estimate of your time now that you have got some inputs for your respective projects on the time, the resources, personnel, etc., and the costs involved. Okay. For those projects where there's a revenue involved, you will also relook at the revenue. In fact, don't look at your previous figures at all, except to get some backup numbers in terms of the basic things. Try to arrive at a revised estimate, revised cost time estimate, a cost estimate, and a revenue estimate. Okay, so give yourself only 5 minutes each for this exercise. I'm not asking you to draw a complete scheduling chart and all that also. Think through your project and see if you get something different which gives you greater level of comfort. So I'll give you 10 minutes overall for this work. And what I intend to do after this is to kind of close this whole workshop with Q&A and then some feedback and whatever else also. But I think we have come to the end of this workshop in the sense of getting inputs from me. Now you can actually look at this. I'll give you another exercise also after we do this exercise. Okay. So your time starts now. 32. If you're through, you can raise your hand. We have finished 5 minutes of the 10 minutes that we have given ourselves. We're given we have finished 5 minutes, so 5 minutes more. Those who have finished can raise their hands. Well,
Agastya sir, this is Disha from Pune cluster. Can I go on with my answers? Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes. Just wait for a minute, he will come.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Anand.
You have 1 more minute for the exercise.
So Disha wanted to say, I think she's ready.
Yeah, can I go on?
This one.
Just a minute, I'm not sure he has
Yeah, I
heard
think
it.
Rahul is not able to hear us.
Yeah, sorry.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, now I had removed my this one speaker actually.
Yeah, there is some problem. So Disha wanted to go ahead.
You want to share that? Okay,
Yeah.
quickly. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So, in terms of the stage gate review,
Yeah.
so we are developing the project of adopt a sapling for corporates and individuals to adopt these planted saplings by Pune Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So, where are we today in terms of um, developing the collaboration with partners, that is the municipal corporation, since they provide us with saplings for plantation for free. So we have
Mm-hmm.
established that chain and it's working fine. And also we have tied up with some tribal community near Pune where they give us the bamboo tree guards which are eco-friendly. So in that sense, the collaboration is formed up. Also, we want to develop the IT platform where corporates and individuals can come and adopt these saplings. It would be something like a community based social media backed platform. So that work has started. The project has started 4 months back, and so far we have chipped in something like 2 lakhs rupees, mostly for IT development because the rest comes for free. Then where we will end up would be the full-fledged ID platform with established data collection and updating mechanism. So every time when a volunteer is protecting a sapling, he or she will be able to log into the platform and give us the updates of the sapling. The sponsors who have adopted the saplings can see the growth. They can go to the sapling itself and click pictures, say that it is flowering, blossoming, things like that. So we plan to reach at least 5,000 saplings adopted by sponsors out of 10,000 saplings that are promised by corporation. So the overall budget at the end stage would be expenditure around 10 lakhs with 2 years of timeline. Present risks involve, of course, sapling sustainability given the sudden change in weather and also in terms of these tree guards. We are going to try these eco-friendly tree guards for the first time. So we don't know in terms of cattle and things, when these trees are planted near forest areas or in a rural areas, they can get eaten up by sheeps and things. So we are testing that. So that is a risk. For future risks, I have listed partners backing out for some random reason that we can't say for now. Also, poor response on adoption. Of course, that is always a risk. And assistance needed from management would be consistent coordination. So now I'm thinking from PKC standpoint, since I'm the project manager, I would need to coordinate as well as help with tremendous outreach activities and roping in CSR time to time. That is also given. Assumptions here, in my opinion, are eco-friendly tree guards would survive. So this is, as I said, is a risk. And volunteers flow. So currently we are roped in a few NGOs where the people come and they are not planting, since planting is done by corporation. They are securing the saplings with these guards and they are updating things on our platform. So if that flow of volunteer involvement gets reduced, then it's a huge risk, or it's an assumption that it will keep on going, people will keep on coming to us. So yeah, those were my points. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The exercise that we gave was on cost estimation and time estimation. So has your estimate changed or it's the same?
No, sir. So far it's the same, and we could manage to fit in our expenditures for first 4 months accordingly, like how we had planned. A few lakhs would be required. It's going as per plan.
Okay. So anybody else would like to just share about what they did in the last 10 minutes? Yes, Mrutyunjay has raised his
So
hand.
can
Yeah.
I start?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, sir, I break out complete structure into the following parts. Like, first, what we are trying to do is like we want to take the survey of the site, around like where there is be segregated based on the lake and the with the farmers, like urban and the rural, and based on that the lakes should be visited and their health and water quality related issues around the
No,
habitat will
you
be
just
monitored
stuck
for
to
the
the
2 months. The
point.
cost will be
Just answer only my question. Has your time estimate been revised based on what we discussed? And has the cost estimate
yes,
been
it has. It
revised?
has. Cost estimate has been changed as well as the time estimate, sir.
So what was before and what is after?
So the cost estimate before was 36 months. Now we reduced to 24 months, and the total cost was, yeah, time estimate reduced, and the cost estimate little bit enhanced. The reason being, like, there are a few things we haven't incorporated, like awareness camps and monitoring or the exact KPIs to be calculated and quantified. So those things require some kind of effort from our end, and that is the reason some extra cost to mitigate those risks required basically.
Yeah. What is your confidence level about both these estimates compared to the previous one?
So now I think confidence level is something around 80 to 90%. I think 85. I think we can.
Okay. So I'm saying I'm just looking at whether we feel more confident about being realistic about it. All right.
Yeah,
That's
earlier
a
it was
test. There's a test
65
for
kind of
whether
scenario.
we are able to do better estimation of time and cost. Okay. Now I'll just go back. Thanks, Disha and Mrutyunjay, for these inputs. Disha actually has virtually kind of done the next exercise also, because I was planning to do an exercise on creating an executive summary fully. Before that, I'll quickly cover a part of the risk management, which I think is important for us to look at. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll cover this, so which is not easy. We take a few hours to cover risk management. So I know that you will not understand it fully, but I want you to give you a flavor of what risk management is. So how to identify a risk is very simple. You write a sentence. If so and so event happens, like if the cattle come and eat the plants in area XYZ, whatever, or if the rains don't come. Sorry?
Tree guard, she was saying.
Yeah, if the tree guards are not in place or not protecting enough, etc., if that happens, then this will happen. That is that we lose so many plants. We expect to lose so much percentage of the plants that have been planted. And what is the impact on my performance of in the CSR project? I lose my reputation. I can lose my customer. I mean the client's confidence, etc., etc. You can put that. I just gave an example just that came readily to my mind on this, relevant to what we are doing. Okay. Now the thing is, there are two parts to this whole risk identity. There is one, an event that is likely to happen. So there's a probabilistic nature of that. The second part is there's an impact on the overall project deliverable. So if you put these as two dimensions of what you look at, so there is a consequence and there's a this is a consequence, that means the impact in terms of cost, time, etc., and there's a probability that this event will happen. Okay, so for every event that is likely to happen, or every risk that is there, you can create what we call a risk cube. Okay, in simple words. So this is a very high probability that this event will happen. This is a low probability that an event will happen. The consequence, low consequences, low impact, and very high impact. So this is a worst case scenario, high impact and high probability of something happening. So we marked it in red, a few squares which are close to this corner, and this is these are the things that are going to have a bigger impact on our estimates of time, cost, etc. Okay, and even on the results and benefits. Our effort in risk management is about how to push this downward. That means reduce or guard against the probability, high probability of occurrence of the event, and how to reduce the impact. That is what, in simple words, is risk management. We try to push the red to an yellow and an yellow to a green. But let's understand, we cannot have 100% insurance or assurance that we'll do 100% risk management and there'll be no risks. Then we just include all that in our whole plan and say that this is a project. We are saying that we are not, in our basic estimation of the cost and time, considering any risks. But when we take these risks into account, we need additional resources, time, money, and all that. That is the outcome of a risk management process. Okay, so you can just look at, I mean, again, probability of occurrence, these are all, we don't have data to calculate this. This is only a guesstimate of that you can do initially, but over a period of time with multiple things, you might be able to do it. So right now, I would say we are talking about uncertainty management rather than risk management because these probabilities are not known to us. But I think the in principle, you take any event that is likely to occur, and the simplest example is it may rain today evening, and contingency plan is I carry an umbrella. Okay, now the probability that it may rain may be 80% or it may be 20%. So my taking and not taking the umbrella will have a consequence. So I just understand this, and then eventually I'm a human being, I decide what to do, and I'm prepared for the rest of the consequences. So we must be able to tell the funding agency these are the likely consequences of this, but the project is guarded enough to deliver a minimum impact on the or the impact a benefit of so much. So when you're promising something, don't promise something where there is a high probability of failure. Also promise something which is deliverable even with some of the risks coming into place. That's in summary. I mean, you can read all these slides and all that. Risks in CSR projects, both unknown unknowns and known unknowns are there. We have to try and look at how to push the unknown unknowns to known unknowns. That's what I had mentioned earlier. Unknown social conditions require management and time. Yes, how do communities react? Uh, Anytime you provide a benefit to a community, there'll be politicians, there'll be castes, there'll be classes, there will be lots of forces that come into place. So we had to become aware of all this, and we had to see how to reduce. So a lot of contingency planning in your whole planning process must address some of these societal and social forces that are in the environment, in addition to whatever could be the ecosystem variations and so on. Okay, so we can do this a little later also. The exercise I would like you to do is, with all this that we have learned so far, can we create an executive summary of each one's project? So just create an executive summary of the project. I'll maybe take a little time to search for the slide that where I said this is it. Probably. You can just look at these points, minimum requirements in a charter, and put it very briefly. So the exercise is to finish an executive summary in 10 minutes. So which means I guess this program, this session will go on till 1:15 approximately. I hope it is okay for most of you. Do you want this slide on?
Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So just use it as a reference, but let the thoughts flow freely. You just look at as if you're sitting in an airport going to the office of ONGC and you're making a very quick proposal for a presentation. It must be less than one page, I would say. In fact, put a constraint like that. Less than one page, if preferably just one paragraph. Try to capture all this in an executive summary form. So what you will get is only the sugarcane juice. You will throw away rest of the mass that is there in your proposal. Just the sugarcane juice. So put it through the grinding stones and get just the juice out of it.
No.
You are not fond of biscuit.
Pardon me? No, no, I take this coffee. I was not taking it earlier.
You did your digital certificate, life certificate you did?
Yeah.
They extended it by 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've given a little more time and we can start to close this session and the workshop itself. Hmm. I I think I should actually close it somewhat abruptly, but what I'll do is I have another small task to do, and I'm going to share the presentation right now. Sometimes when we are in this workshop mode, we tend to become like teachers. So this is a kind of homework I suggest you all look at doing, which I think anyway you will have to do. Can you create a proposal or or convert a concept paper to a proposal if you have not yet made a proposal? With a kind of a page limit of 6 pages or 2000 words, I have just put a number. I mean, you can set your own target for that. Add this executive summary which has come out of it, which can be refined while you're doing it. Make sure your time estimates and cost estimates are properly defendable in any forum. Template, you can use whatever is been circulated to you. I gave you the CSR checklist, etc. But if required, I can suggest a few changes to the earlier templates which some of you have used, uh, which may help others. But strictly, if you ask me, unless the funding agency asks for a specific for template, it is absolutely, it's not necessary that we follow a fixed format. It should create more flow in the way we are doing presenting it. Is the way, as I said, I'm not very prescriptive about it, but I suggest this you do it before you forget what you've learned, because normally I think a workshop, the shelf life of the learning of a workshop will be probably up to the lunch break or the dinner only. So please try to see that you put the learning into some action mode and write down points for yourself. That will be the best way to uh, learn from the work, because the real learning happens after the workshop, not just during the workshop. So
Pictures and figures we can include.
yeah, please make sure that your proposals have the required amount of pictorial data presentation as much as possible, and also other things that will attract the decision makers in this regard. Thank you very much for being participative. I know that the last session has been heavy, not surprised by it, but obviously it's like the turning the screw. The first few turns may not give you the full pressure, but when you turn the screw in the last 1/8 of a round or something, the full impact of the pressure is turned. That's what probably as a mechanical engineer I'm good at doing, and so you would have felt the pressure of it. But I can tell you that if you can uh, what I've explained is a very ideal way of doing it. So even if you just aim for that ideal way of doing it and you go a little below that also, it won't, you will be able to make a great proposal. So focus on making a proposal from good to great. That's the message for you. A good proposal is probably good enough, but it's not good enough for an approval. So make it a great proposal, not just the proposal, but the overall project. I feel great that if I have been associated with some of the projects that will happen, and eventually it will benefit both your institution and cluster as well as the beneficiaries out of that. I feel nice to have been associated with this. I thank Dr. Sapna and Rahul for enabling me to do this workshop, and also I thank the CEOs and other people who interacted with me earlier during the before the workshop was actually delivered. I wish you all the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Agastya. I would like to thanks on behalf of TSA office also, and to all the participant who has given their 2 days time. And I hope this session would be very useful for you all. And we have discussed also that once you will submit as proposal, we will take one by one proposal with Mr. Agastya also, and maybe like half an hour to 1 hour, we can have a one-to-one interaction so that he can give a very particular feedback for each of the proposal before submission to the ONGC. So we request you all to submit all this proposal within next two days, because the time which has been set up by ONGC has already gone, and we have to submit all these proposals so that we can ask them for the next way forward. And apart from this, I have also given you a link for the feedback form, even in the chat. And I have sent you a email also with this link. I request you all as soon as possible if you can. It's a very short feedback form. If you can just give us a feedback, it will help us to understand the effectiveness and also what can be added in such kind of future sessions for the cluster's capability development. Thank you all from my side.
Thank you, Rahul, and I wish everyone all the best. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you,
Sir.
sir. I will be sharing this presentation with you all. Mr. Agastya, if you can share the presentation
I'll
with
send
us.
you those two
Yeah, I will share it.
presentations. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice
Thank you.
day.
Thank you,
Bye.
Agastya sir. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
you.
Bye,
Thank
sir.
you, Eric. Very
Thank
useful.
Yeah, thank you. I really
Thank you,
enjoyed
sir.
my time with all of you.
Yeah, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Executive summary will hear nothing. We close it.
No, we're closing it. Yeah, it was just a exercise. Rahul